So let me just start by admitting that how I had planned this episode originally versus how I've ended up intending to do the episode is very, very different. I went in with a near emotional side to it, but it's like I'm at the point where I just stopped giving a damn. But anyways, for the most part, it is pretty much an episode on sex and money, but discussions have to be had. So, that makes sense for the entirety of the episode. But before I can get into it, what are my manners? I should have started with an intro. Welcome to Breakdown on West Side, your number one breakdown podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is Sir Denver B. This is a much shorter, simpler type episode. No instrumentals, minimal editing, just me going off and sharing my thoughts on, one of the many topics that exist in the realm of relationships. And, possibly taking some examples from real life that, seem to affect y'all. Now, before I can say what exactly I want to discuss, I need to sort of put some pieces into place which kind of give proper context to what I want to talk about, because I feel like this is something that has pretty much been in need of discussing for quite a while, and I've been telling myself that I'll discuss it, but I've literally been sitting on it for a bit of a while. Now, let me just set the stage with a very recent story that came out over the past week from, when this episode comes. So there was a guy who used to play in the NBA known as Joe Brown, who recently discovered that his wife has an OnlyFans. And he was pictured losing his shit on video. And, interestingly enough, she was the one recording the video. And she was like, oh, you knew who I was when you married me, blah, blah, blah. But all in all, the long and short of it is she has an OnlyFans. Then, sometime around 2 months ago, I stumbled onto a tweet that was made by the popular barbershop owner known as Mwende Frey, who has a barbershop where, you come, you get a haircut, and there's a bunch of babes twerking and shit. But all in all, she puts out a tweet and she says, and I quote, "My punani got me a car from my man. Yours gets you character development. Told you shouldn't be wearing panties and your man will be spending like crazy." End quote. Now, that is something that's being said by a babe who claims that her barbershop does pretty well, save for whatever business wrangles she seems to be having right now online. But, for the most part, she said that she's been having a pretty successful business and shit. And last but not least, before I get into what exactly I want to talk about, in about, what was it, like March of this year? Actually April if I'm not wrong, the Ugandan socialite and baby mama to some of Diamond Platnumz's children, known as Zari, came out on social media and said, and I quote, "Baby girl, if you get a chance to cheat for money, then please do it. These men are cheating for stupid things like brown thighs, tongue rings, and big ass. Cheat for a house, cheat for a piece of land, cheat for your dream car. It is what it is." End quote. Now, out of the 3 stories that I have presented over there, or at least out of the 3 examples, I think that you can sort of see that there's a pattern of like 3 different women who are all talking about or relating to some sort of sex or sex work and some sort of monetary benefit to it. And there's a very transactional way that it's being looked at. There's a way in which they kind of make it seem like, oh, utilize your pussy to get yourself some shit, which just seems, okay, initially I'd have said that it seems, a bit weird or a bit bad, but considering that there's a lot more women who are willing to take part in it today and they're openly speaking about it, I'd say it's a little bit more normalized than it probably should be. And I honestly feel like this is an issue that's worth discussing. Now, to be quite honest, when I was planning how I was going to do this episode, initially I was going to go off and be like, how can these women do this? Why are they misleading other young women? Why are we prioritizing making money over things like, like sexual purity and shit? But I don't know, like the closer I came to hitting record and starting to record, the more I felt like that's what everyone else will do. Like, we will have this discussion and I'll lament how bad this is and how this hurts women more than they think it does. But the reality of it is, anyone who's been having these discussions, if not talking for the women, kind of sounds a bit emotional and, it just sounds bad and it just screams prophet of doom. So I figured, what? I'm just going to switch things up and be a little bit more objective and a little bit more, I don't want to say logical, but, a lot less emotional. if I can call it that, and just look at it for what it is, because we've had a name for this for quite a bit of time, and for the most part we've kind of given it the name Clitocurrency over the past couple of years, and it's pretty much encapsulated most of what's being talked about here. But at its core, or at least in general, it is pretty much just transactional sex. There's a money element to it, there's a sex element to it. One person is screwing the other and they're expecting some sort of value add, or at least in most of these cases, some sort of monetary benefit. But, at the end of the day, it is pretty much, just easier to just call it Clitocurrency. I think it takes away from the seriousness of calling it transactional sex. Now, interestingly enough, I have thought about it. And, when you take away the emotional side of it, when you take away the guy talking about how bad it is long term and shit like that side of it, if you take away what a lot of society will look down upon and shun it for, you kind of think about it, Clitocurrency as a currency is actually pretty weird. Like, it's actually particularly weird. Because if, you refer to it as Clitocurrency and you think of it as an asset or, as a currency of sorts, it's actually pretty weird. Because when you think about it, there's certain characteristics that just make it seem like a particularly odd asset, if you can call it that, or currency if you want to call it that as well. I know both of those are different, but I'll definitely be using them interchangeably. So when you kind of think about it, its value never really stays the same, and it's never really the same across the board. Because you think about it, the value of a particular babe's pussy is not going to be the same with a married guy versus a single dude. If the married guy is faithful, it might not be the same with a politician versus a pauper. It might not be the same to a guy that is, comfortably getting a lot of pussy versus the guy that's the simp that's always had feelings for the babe. The currency value is never really the same. Granted, the forex exchange exists and, the value is never the same. And, it always goes up and down. But in this particular case, it's not dependent on an agreed upon value. It's literally just some people will value it a lot more than others, and some people just won't even value it. Then also, the value usually tends to depend on who holds it. Is the shorty fine? Is she slim? Is she thick? Is she old? Is she young? Is she 18 years old, 22, 25? Is she 37, or is she 40, or is she 60 years old? At the end of the day, it's not like the value is going to be the same across the board. Even though the shorty who's 50 has been fucking great and she has some of the best pussy ever, and that's been acclaimed by people who shagged her 20, 30 years ago, even till today, it's not like the value is going to be the same. And, because, whoever it is that's holding it is probably a little bit old, or maybe a little bit young, or maybe not the kind of body type that some people might like versus others, the value will still be particularly different. Then also, it doesn't depreciate based off of, whether people will have a demand for it. Its appreciation or depreciation is mostly determined based off of the supply or lack thereof, and the past history and or reputation. Because when you think about it, if a shorty is known for screwing 500 guys, the value of the Clitocurrency will not be as high, as opposed to the babe that, hasn't been known to shag anyone besides maybe her past two boyfriends. And also the reputation matters quite a bit. Because when you look at the babe that banged Chrisky Ruby and the babe that bangs your local weed dealer, they're going to be valued very, very differently. Not unless if the babe that banged Chrisky Ruby also banged the weed dealer. Then, that one kind of drops a hell of a lot more. Because, if you're banging the upper tier high class dude or dudes, then you are perceived to be, a babe who deals with upper class dudes. And if you're banging the weed dealer, then your value will be a lot less because you're just banging the local weed dealer and maybe one or two guys down here at the grassroots level. So that'll affect your value. And that can make it appreciate or depreciate. So if you're banging the weed dealer, then it could depreciate. But if you're banging the upper tier guy after the weed dealer, then maybe it might not appreciate as much because you started with the weed dealer. But if it was the other way around, it would depreciate a hell of a lot more. It's a very, very interesting and sort of weird way to look at value when you think about it. then also the more it's traded, the lesser the value, which is wild when you think about it. Because if I take 1,000 bob and I give my homie 1,000 bob, it's still 1,000 bob, whether I like it or I don't. If I use it to buy something and I give it up and, I get the thing will be worth 1,000 bob, and the person who sold it to me will have gotten 1,000 bob. So the value doesn't really change based off of how it's been used or traded. But Clitocurrency, like, the more people that you're trading it with, the more the value dips. Even though you're talking about higher tier dudes and shit, like, you'll just be regarded as an upper tier hoe. Like, that doesn't particularly make you a lot better value than the lower tier one. It just means that you're priced higher for the kind of same shit that you do. Like, at the end of the day, you're still technically regarded, at least to some extent, as a hoe. But last but not least, it doesn't always work everywhere. Like, if you are in an office that has a bunch of men above you in the hierarchy and, you screw a bunch of them, it's gonna look like it's not too hard and the Clitocurrency is doing pretty well, up until one of those male bosses gets switched up for a woman, and then suddenly that Clitocurrency has zero value, not unless if she's lesbian. So all of a sudden, you can't fuck your way through to the top, not unless if you can screw the person above her to kick her out, because at the end of the day, it's not like she'll respond to the Clitocurrency. It's almost like trying to trade Bitcoin in the Congo forest. It's not like anyone's gonna try and sell you a bunch of meat or vegetables with just Bitcoin. Like, you need actual money for that. So its value in some places is absolutely worthless. But then when you think about it from a long-term perspective, like, at the end of the day, yes, there's all of these characteristics that make Clitocurrency particularly, different and weird as opposed to most assets or currencies. But at the end of the day, like, money comes and goes, and I'm guessing so does Bitcoin, but pussy still remains. The Clitocurrency doesn't really, change hands too much, because at the end of the day, your vagina is your vagina and it'll still be your vagina. It's just, giving people access and shit. And that kind of raises the question of what long-term side effects, will come with you utilizing this asset so damn much. And to be honest, I've never really felt like the long-term effects really justify the short-term pleasure. Because if you think about it, like, yes, you can fuck your way to the top and you'll make a bunch of money, but if everyone knows you as a high-class hoe, then who the hell is going to look and be like, what, I don't mind saving this hoe? At the end of the day, reputation matters quite a lot, especially when you're looking at interpersonal relationships and relating with the opposite sex. So you having a higher valued Clitocurrency because, you haven't screwed around and, you don't have your sexual history out there, means that you're going to be a lot better off than the person that's utilized that Clitocurrency as an actual currency. And, people can come and make arguments about how being transactional is a part of human nature and the sex part has been a part of it. If you look at arranged marriages and shit, and, men going and marrying beautiful women because they wanted to, sleep with them and have kids with them, kind of makes sense. And you'd be justified in making that argument because, if you're putting Clitocurrency next to that, it's the near equivalent of you being able to order a burger and then moving to a point where instead of ordering the burger, you're practically just getting the meat itself and leaving everything else. At the end of it, the burger only makes sense because of everything else, not just the meat. The meat is the best part of the burger, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't mean that everything else doesn't have value. Like the way the buns are made, the way the cheese is added on, all the other toppings, like they give more value to the meat because they were all bundled together. And so it made more sense to, marry someone off as opposed to just shag someone and give them whatever monetary or, whatever value it is that they'd want. So to a certain degree, I can agree that Clitocurrency as some sort of transactional value, almost like dowry and arranged marriages, is a part of our culture today. But at the same time, I think that unlike an arranged marriage and like being married off, I think the long-term effects just do not justify actually trading in it as much as some people might think of doing today. And I know we're in a day and age where a lot of people believe that the ends justify the means, but in this particular case, do those ends justify the next ends that you'll be looking towards? I don't know. Maybe I might be wrong about this. Maybe I'm looking at this all wrong. Either way, I could be wrong about this, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open on IG, on Facebook. It is at Breaktime on Westside. On Twitter, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.